Hey, Jordan, how do you make worship a spiritual practice in your family?
Well, you got to come to Riverbend to find out.
Let's talk about that. Hey, everybody. My name is Scott Vermillion, and this is Jordan Gristy, and we're here talking to you about spiritual practices for families and how we can integrate those within our everyday life. And so this week, Jordan was leading the discussion on worship and how to make worship a spiritual practice in our family. So thanks for dropping by.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about when it comes to worship in your family.
Well, there's a lot to be thinking about because worship is kind of a loaded word. But where I went with it was looking at John 4, verses 20 through 24.
All right.
And in this is a story where Jesus is with a woman, a Samaritan woman at the well. And in this story, she's asking about where to worship, where's the proper place, and kind of like having a little banter with Jesus. And at the end, he pretty much says where worship comes in and what God is looking for are people who worship in spirit and in truth. And so that's what that's what I was using as a framework for a conversation, is this idea of what is spirit and what is truth. What is Jesus trying to tell us in that?
Yeah. Well, and I like that. I like the fact that we're removing it from a locale, that says you have to be in this specific place, which the Jews, that was the worship was in the temple. You had to worship there. And so Jesus is expanding that for us. Tell us a little bit about what that means to worship in the spirit. What does that mean?
Well, very loaded question, no doubt about it, because to me, you can take a lot of different ways about this. But the way that we were going with this is more of this is a part of the heart. This is a part where, the spirit of the law, the intention, the intimacy of it, that this is much more of, it's not just all knowledge. There's so much more that goes into worship in this fact that I'm actually connecting. There's a relationship that's happening here. And so we took that much more of being on the emotional side, the side that connects and the spirit.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And, because I think kids get that. Kids understand that emotion and they can jump into that pretty easily. And so tell me about the truth part. How does the truth part interact with the worship?
Well, I think, you have to know kind of what you're worshiping. And you can come up with anything in your mind, as I think many have done in history, to come up with this idea that I'm going to worship this idea of something. And I think when Jesus is saying spirit and in truth, it does go to the knowledge part. It goes to the head part. It goes to the concept of what are you worshiping, who are you worshiping, and what is your concept of God, and where do you find those truths about Him. And that you cannot have simply just spirit by itself and emotion without having some truth behind it. That there's a reason He put the two of them together, and through that, of course, I hope that you can. The hope is that if you have both spirit and truth, that there is a response to worship in that.
Yeah. So these are great concepts, and I love the fact that we're dealing with the relational side, the heart side, as well as the head, and how those two are interacting, instructing one another. I think you can't have one without the other, and I think it's probably why Jesus said that.
Yeah.
Right? He's good call, Jesus, by the way.
Yeah.
So how do you do this? Like, those are kind of heady, kind of abstract thoughts for kids. How do you make it practical for like your family? Like, how did they get in on it?
Yes, well, that was the conversation where it took a certain turn, because that's great. We understand what you're trying to say, but if we're saying that worship is a response, how do we create avenues for our kids to respond? Because we say that, okay, prayer makes really good sense for spirit, that is a great response to say, and I want more of that spirit. And Bible reading, of course, is another spiritual practice that we've been talking about, and that goes with truth. But that's great if you just have prayer and you have Bible reading by itself. But if there's no avenue, if there's no response to that, then worship ceases to exist. It stops there.
Yeah.
And so the question was, how do we get our kids to respond? How do we get them to respond to the truth? How do we get them to respond in spirit? And that is a very hard thing, because when you're really sitting down with it, what does that look like? In reality, it is such an intention to make sure that if we pray for somebody, that we're responding to that. We're not just saying, God help them. We're asking ourselves too, how can we help God help them? Mm-hmm. And as we read some truth in the Bible, that's great. But if we're not translating that to our lives, then what difference does it make? So making sure that it can be heard and seen by your kids is huge, regardless of any age. Making sure that it's something tangible, not always just thought, but definitely have something tangible to show in response, was another big key factor that I think is very important.
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful because helping kids to deal with whatever's in their current reality, right? Whether it's running through a fun park. Well, who made the park?
Yeah.
I mean, who made these legs of yours and they could run like this? And kind of anything on the physical realm, you can point that out, that God's behind that.
Yeah.
He made you to do these things, and it's for your enjoyment. As well as the truth about who He is. When you say, hey, when you read a passage of the Bible and say, hey, God is trustworthy, what does that mean? And to respond in that way, I love that. I think that is it seems like a simple step, to take, but you have to have some intention behind it to lead into a real response.
Yeah.
But I love that. I think that's something that we could all do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not easy. It's when you said intentionality, it's very easy to go through the steps of prayer, very easy to go steps of giving, even giving, just doing that without any spirit or without any knowledge, and just making sure that your kids see that and understand why these things are being done, and also for them. One other big point that we were trying to make was making sure that they do so without an obligation.
Yeah.
That the last thing that we want our kids to do is respond out of obligation. We want them to respond because of the Spirit and because of the knowledge that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's where we probably have to take the lead on that, right?
Yeah.
That we model that in our prayers at dinner time or in our enjoyment of what we're seeing, the truth of God in that day, and celebrating that. I think they model that. They'll model how we respond to.
Yeah.
So that's the good news of it.
Bad news too for some of us.
The modeling sometimes turns negative.
Yeah, sometimes we don't like that when we get that picture back.
The negative imprint is not always the best thing to want to shoot for. Well, that's great. Jordan, thanks for stopping by and telling us a little bit about worship and how we can make it a spiritual practice in our family. And if you guys have ideas about how you're doing it and ways that you're making spirit and truth come alive with your kids, let us know. Write it in the comments, and we want to learn from you. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.